Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Daniel Ricciardo is stirring the pot ahead of the Monza Grand Prix, expecting more on-track drama between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris to occur, potentially as it did back in Austria, based on the comments that Lando made after winning Max's home Grand Prix last weekend. Ricciardo believes the simply lovely comments after winning that race would have riled Verstappen up to really look for revenge this weekend in Monza, especially because there's already been one crash of the weekend so far before the F1 tracks have hit the tarmac. What does that mean for what we might expect this weekend? Plenty of other things going on as well. Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. This, of course, is the safety car in the wall today outside the Parabolica. I'm still going to call it the Parabolica. I know they changed the name of it, but it is what it is. This is Bert Mylander's car in the barriers. Now, difficult to say precisely what happened here, but it's pretty rare and obviously kind of ironic to see a safety car in the wall, the red flag deployed, the safety car, oh, well, there it is in the wall. So, this was actually the footage of the moment here, and it's difficult to exactly understand what precisely happens. But yeah, so Mylander, so what's going on here, right, is they do some like reconnaissance laps just to test out the track before the weekends. One point, of course, is this tarmac related? They've resurfaced the track this weekend, although that actually should increase the grip rather than decrease it. And as you guys can see, Mylander kind of veers off to the left and then immediately kind of goes to the right and ends up in this spin and into the wall. Now, I think what probably happened here is that he knew his brakes had just failed, and therefore he deliberately initiates this spin in order to, you know, basically dissipate as much energy as possible before it's inevitably going to go into the wall. So it doesn't seem to me like driver error here. It seems like the car just had some sort of failure, which isn't really a great look. They do have a backup safety car though, so it'll be all right. Another classic coming out of Alpine, by the way. They're going on strike. I mean, the French, they love it. It's what they do. And this is due to the fact that they are believed to be shutting down their engine project for 2026. Of course, the staff working on that project are not going to be happy with the fact that they're cancelling the project. Now, is it justifiable? Sure, the engine's been bad for the last few years. They don't think it's going to be much better in 2026. It's still pretty embarrassing, it's got to be said, for a Renault Works team to be buying a Mercedes engine or something, but that apparently is the direction they're looking to take. So there's lots of workers striking at Viry, where they're going to manufacture the thing, and also in Monza, Renault workers are going to be there as well with some sort of peaceful protest underway. They say, we don't understand what justifies killing this elite F1 entity and betraying its legacy and its DNA. Alpine themselves say it's not going to impact the team operations. They're going to be peaceful protests. No decision has been taken yet whether we're going to keep or not keep that engine project. But and then they're going to meet with these employee representatives. So it's just another Alpine classic, I think it's got to be said. Here are some rear wings for the weekends. It's Monza. We are going to have some low downforce versions on these cars, but to be fair, there's always a question, how much downforce can you get away with? Because you want to be fast in a straight line, but you also want to have enough downforce to preserve the tyres in the corners, especially when the new track surface is probably going to grain up the tyres a fair bit, and it's going to be very hot. Tyre degradation is going to be a factor this weekend. You don't want to be sliding around that much. The teams may well test out a couple of rear wing configurations. You can't run a barn door on your car, obviously, but you can, you know, choose whether you're going to have a very unloaded or a slightly loaded rear wing at Monza. This is what Ferrari are coming up with. They've brought some serious upgrades this weekend. Again, the one connector for the rear wing is what they've gone back to now. They trialled it with two, with one. They've gone back to one. This is their wing they're going to use this weekend. These are some of the details on their floor as well. I think most of the details really we can't see on this new floor from Ferrari, but it's a big upgrade package this weekend, and frankly, it absolutely must work. This is old on the top, new on the bottom. It's got to work. If it doesn't work, not only this season, but also next season for Ferrari may well be significantly compromised. This is Red Bull's rear wing for this weekend. Pretty innovative, unique idea, really. Now, this is not the first time we have seen this rear wing, however. It's not a brand new upgrade. It's not a circuit-specific change. They used this in Spa, but then they realised that actually with the rain coming and needing the performance in Sector 2, they decided to put more wing on the car, and that's what Max Verstappen ran ran with, and it worked. He got pole position, but of course he was then demoted due to the penalty, the engine penalty that he took at that Grand Prix, and at least in part because of having less top speed, it was then a difficulty making massive progress in the field. But this weekend, they are probably going to go back to run that rear wing, because usually this is what Red Bull do. They run the same rear wing at Spa as they do at Monza, and this is the one they used at Spa and then took off the car, and probably they're going to put it back on the car here at Monza. So yeah, it's going to be a higher top speed version, and obviously it's difficult to say this weekend how the other teams are really going to stack up. The temperature probably will have a part to play. I'd say Red Bull won't be too mad about that. Certainly the teams that preserve their tyres better will be pretty happy about it. Mercedes, on the other hand, they will have their concerns because their car has worked better this season when it's been lower temperatures, and their tyre degradation is not as good as it was, let's say, with the W13 back in 2022. James Allison even says the new floor of the car has delivered more downforce, but it's not sure whether it's actually making the balance better or worse. So they think it's better, but they're not sure that they know how to use it in the best possible way. And we'll see this weekend whether they can get on top of that, because it's quite critical for Mercedes. They can go back to the floor they used in Silverstone and Spa, where Hamilton won both races. But obviously since then, McLaren have taken a step. Ferrari are now taking a step. Like, Mercedes really, this floor needs to work. They need to find a way to make it work, or they're probably not going to win a race from now to the end of the season, just because the other teams have made progress since those couple of Grand Prix that I mentioned. But look, so we'll see this weekend. It shouldn't be a great track for them really, Monza, but it's going to be interesting because it's just so much different to what we saw back in Zandvoort. And Red Bull, of course, are the same way. Max is saying this weekend, well, obviously I'm not happy about what happened in Zandvoort, my home race, but very different set of circumstances, very different track, obviously. That could well favour Red Bull far more so than it did last weekend. The RB20 will get upgrades down the line. They have a development program starting here where the team will actually fall back at least partially on older specifications, in particular the underbody. So it's kind of Aston Martin style, isn't it? They're going back to what did work before and trying to find a better compromise, which is fine, but at the same time it is effectively damage limitation, right? This sounds like a team that's trying to hold on to the drivers in the Constructors' Championship rather than trying to fire themselves forwards. But then again, what can you do if you're Red Bull? You've got to make the car as quick as it can be, and clearly some of the changes they've made, or some of the changes they were forced to make, whatever you think about that, have not helped them massively, and therefore they've got to find the best compromise right now. Let's talk, though, about what the drivers had to say today, because lots of interesting quotes coming out of the press conferences. As always, of course, this is your Ferrari 2025 partnership that will be at Monza next year. Alex Albon with a couple of words on Logan Sargent as well. I thought this was a little bit interesting, actually. Logan has a bright future ahead of him. I feel for him. I'll keep what was said behind closed doors. So I think Alex has been quite, quite gracious, really, in what's happened here over the last few days, the fact that Logan's been let go. But this is pretty interesting on whatever was said behind closed doors there at Williams from James Vowles or whatever is maybe best left unsaid publicly. So, yeah, you can take that as you will. At the end of the day, Sargent didn't deliver. That's my opinion. One man that, well, Mercedes, at least another Mercedes power team will be hoping delivers, is Mr. Kimi Antonelli. And Lewis even says, I said a long time ago, that's who I think Mercedes should choose moving forward. Time will tell. I think, yeah, Hamilton did mention earlier this season that if he had to choose a replacement, he would probably go for Antonelli. And, well, he says a long time ago. Who knows if that even means last year or whatever, when there was kind of discussion about him as a prospect in the Mercedes pipeline. He's been now for some time. Do you think this is anything, a bit of a dig at Russell or not? I mean, probably not, but I thought it was interesting that he's saying, yeah, choose Antonelli going forwards. Does that mean that Lewis has faith that Russell is going to be the man to lead Mercedes to the next level, or does he think that Antonelli is going to be, a Hamilton-esque talent, whereby he was put into the McLaren at 22 years of age or whatever it was, into a top seat straight away? Antonelli's going to get that at 18 years of age. So maybe there's a little something in there on whether Hamilton thinks that Russell is an appropriate leader for the team or not, but, intrigued your thoughts in the comments. This was interesting from Lando as well. I've got to say, Lando doesn't really speak like a world championship winning driver, or a driver that's going to win a world championship, right? Like, you know, he was asked the question, I know there's probably more to these quotes than we get to see, but he was asked, how much confidence does that win give you? And Lando's like, yeah, not a lot, doesn't really change much. And he was also talking, and fair play to Lando being open and honest about this, but if I'm Verstappen, I sense weakness, you know? Like, I just think you've got to look at it from that dog-eat-dog killer mentality perspective that I'm not sure Lando quite has. He's got the pace, like he's got so many attributes, Norris, of a top quality champion driver, but he's clearly just missing something. He even says, I still get so nervous for qualifying, I barely eat anything on Sundays, I struggle to drink anything because of nerves and pressure. And anyone that's done sport, or, you know, myself, I used to swim competitively when I was younger, everyone deals with this to some degree, the nerves, the pressure before a race, but you can manage it, you can cope with it, you can deal with it, and obviously drivers on this level I'm sure will bring sports psychologists into play and stuff like this when you get on. And usually what happens is, sure, you're going to be nervous because, you know, it's important to be nervous on some level because, you know, it means you're getting in that kind of readiness mode and you're excited as well at the same time. But usually what can happen is when it's time to go, when the 5 lights go on, then you're locked in, right, fully in the moment. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Norris's starts haven't been so good. Like, it must be a factor in play. So if I'm Verstappen, I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, okay, I got this guy. Like, I'm not worried about this guy. He's not even taking much confidence in his win. He's saying how he still gets nervous, and I'm up, you know, playing FIFA at 5 a.m. before my race the next day type thing. So, you know, I think it's interesting and it's good that Lando's honest about this, but I do think that Lando's in a championship battle at the end of the day, and some things are probably best not said, or at least kept to yourself, if you know, just from a mentality perspective with your competitors. That's my perspective, but I'm intrigued to your thoughts and the comments on that one. Hamilton was also commenting on the W15. It was interesting that he didn't even mention Red Bull here. He says, I'm definitely more hopeful the car will be nicer to the driver this weekend than it was in Zandvoort, the W15 that is, but others are bringing upgrades, so you have to expect Ferrari to be quick, McLaren to be rapid. I'm just hopeful we are there or thereabouts. So sure, Ferrari have upgrades, they should be faster. McLaren, of course, were the team to beat last weekend. They should probably be again. Doesn't mention Red Bull, pretty interesting, but I'm sure Red Bull, at least in Max's hands, are going to be strong. Even Perez says that, yeah, the car has problems, it's not ideal, and Max's style is better at coping with that than his is. So, you know, pretty interesting admission there from Checo, but he obviously was okay last weekend, and it seems like Red Bull have found a way to allow him to at least be respectable compared to Max, and if he can keep that up, then he might keep his seat, but if he can't, then we know what's going to happen next. Even Perez says, we know our problems, I have every hope we can bring some performance to the car in the coming races, but seemingly not necessarily this weekend. But let's talk about some of the other drama that happened in some of the driver interviews today, with Daniel Ricciardo giving his perspective on what happened back in Zandvoort. If you guys aren't aware, of course, Norris won the race by miles, and over the radio he said, simply lovely, right? Which is Max Verstappen's catchphrase when he wins the races, and it's happened before. And those two guys are friends, right? But of course, we've mentioned it, certainly after what happened back in Austria, as to whether that friendship, especially in a championship fight, could come to blows to some degree. And this is one of those quotes that it's something to say this after a race win, it's another thing entirely to say it in the backyard of that guy who, you know, usually says that, right? Because even Norris went on to say, apparently in an interview for the F1 Kids stuff, to beat someone in their home race, it just means a little bit more. So fair play. Like, I like this version of Norris where he's not unwilling to, you know, go out there, potentially rile somebody up and create a little bit of friction maybe. But Norris hadn't really commented on this after the race. Verstappen hadn't really commented on this after the race. Someone who is going to comment on this after the race, so is actually Daniel Ricciardo. So he's maybe taken some lessons from Christian Horner in terms of how to stir up some drama. But he basically says, of course, he's teamed with both the guys. And he says, I've had the pleasure of teaming with both of them, of course. They're both obviously supremely talented. But Lando basically says the confidence is growing stronger the more time he spent in the sport, right? And, you know, very confident to throw out a simply lovely after the race. I know as much as they're friends, I know how competitive Max is. He would not have taken that very nicely. So we'll see how he responds this weekend. So Daniel Ricciardo is expecting Max Verstappen to come with the heat this weekend onto Lando Norris, in some part as payback for that comment. I mean, it happened in 2023, not necessarily driver to driver, but after Max lost in Singapore, he was like, okay, I'm going to make a statement next weekend in Japan, and that was his intention. And that's exactly what he did with one of the most dominant races of his entire career. Now, it's not like Max can break the laws of physics. If the car is not capable of beating Lando's McLaren, then Max Verstappen is not going to be able to, work miracles. But nonetheless, if we're expecting Max to really come with the heat, Ricciardo reckons that's exactly what he's going to do. And you've also got to recognise for Max, if not for that incident in Austria, this championship would be much more competitive, right? Lando ended up not scoring any points that race. Verstappen still scored 10 points. Had Lando made the overtake happen in Austria and Verstappen, let's say, ended up seconds, that championship gap would have changed by 17 points. Lando would have won. That was 7 over Max if that would have happened. But in the end, Lando DNF'd and Verstappen scored 10 points. So that 17-point gap would have meant that this championship was way more competitive. And it has been the case that for Max, making that contact and, obviously he got the penalty and the damage and everything from the crash with Lando back at the Austrian Grand Prix, it actually worked in Verstappen's favour. So if there is a possibility this weekend for Max to, make some contact with Lando, potentially take him or them both of them out of the race, it might actually help Verstappen in the championship, right? So it would be very interesting to see if those kind of tactics start to come into play, and Ricciardo thinks they might. So stay tuned this weekend, because we've already seen one crash and it's not even got to Friday yet. A couple of other very interesting things before we close out the video here. Jos Verstappen is said not to be happy with Horner's leadership. That's no surprise, and he says that the good people are leaving Red Bull. The interesting thing about this though is that Helmut Marko, of course, who's meant to be Christian Horner's colleague, right, and is meant to be working in the best interest of the team, says, fair play to Toto Wolff trying to lure Max Verstappen away. That's just what a good team principal would do. But he actually does go on to say, on the other hand, Jos is a bigger fan of Toto than he is of Christian, which is one of those things that, Marco works for Red Bull, and he's basically saying, if Jos had his way, he would make Max drive for Mercedes instead of us. So, it's quite fascinating, isn't it? And I'm sure there's still more to come on this. Quickly for you guys, do you think we are going to get a track record this weekend? These are the lap time evolutions over the last few years. 2017, of course, was wet. Hamilton got pole that year by a mile. And as I said yesterday, a 19-1, 19-3, 18-8 is the record from Hamilton back in 2020. The last couple of years, the lap times have surprisingly got a bit slower. It's track condition related, but this year we are going to see something slightly different because the curbs have been changed substantially and the track has been resurfaced. Brand new tarmac, likely to be higher grip, and many of the curbs and the way the track has been designed are now faster than they used to be. So if the 2022 cars could do a 120.1, I think it's definitely possible that this year's cars could get close to Hamilton's record if the track conditions permit, especially because the DRS zone has actually been extended. Last year the activation point was here, now the activation point is basically as you cross the start-finish line about 100 or so meters earlier. This I think is actually probably a good change. If you guys, it's kind of crazy to think about, but Monza is one of the hardest tracks to overtake on the entire calendar. I believe it was last year that you needed something like a 1.5 second lap pace advantage to actually make a move happen, because you lose a lot of time in the corners because of the dirty air, and on the straights, certainly these cars do not have the same slipstream effect as the cars 2021 and previously did, and the DRS is not so effective at Monza because the rear wings are so small and the cars are so, little drag anyway, the DRS isn't that effective. So I think this is probably a good change, but it also means that in qualifying, you get an extra 100 meters of DRS, so that's going to mean another, couple of tenths, shall we say, off the potential lap times going into this weekend. So keep an eye on the track record potentially. The other point though is the track is meant to be very hot, which is not necessarily ideal. Like if your tyres are getting cooked, not necessarily an ideal for a qualifying lap, but it probably is good for how good the race might be on Sunday, because if the track temps are going to be this high, a one-stop might be a challenge for many of the teams, if not all of the teams, and there's even been talk from, James Allison and the Mercedes guys that, if the track temperatures are really that high and the new tarmac, which might cause a bit of graining, and there's more grip, it's going to be potentially difficult on these teams to make their tyres get to the end of the Grand Prix. So, could be a fascinating one. Very much interested to your thoughts and all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.